Hey there, internet friends. Welcome to another episode of That Nerdy Site Show, weekly podcast where the team members from That Nerdy Site get together to talk about our lives and all of the nerdy things we love about them. I'm your host, Trevor Starkey, and joining me, we have Cameron Abbott. How you doing, Cameron?
Boy.
All right. And making his long overdue return, and actually this will be like his first return back. So now when I say it on this week's That D Plus show, it's going to seem weird that I said it's a long overdue return. But Frank Bazzani joining us. How you doing, Frank?
Doing good. I'm still happy to be back.
Yeah.
I'm still happy to be back.
Yeah, it is. It's lovely to have you back. We've missed you. We just recorded this week's Guardians of the Galaxy with the three of us and Logan for the Guardians of the Galaxy holiday special for that D Plus show. And yeah, just having you back on a podcast, fun. I've missed getting to chat with you. And so yeah. So a little bit of housekeeping, because I'm going to Disney this week. We've already recorded this week's That D Plus show, so check that out this week. I can plug that. It's going to be Guardians of the Galaxy holiday special, as I just said, and then also it's going to be more Skyrim stuff this week. The first Skyrim Let's Plays recorded in the new spot, so check that out on our YouTube on Tuesdays and Thursdays. youtube.com/thatnerdysite. Other than that, today we're going to be talking about God of War Ragnarok. Now that Cameron has started his path down through it, Frank, like me, has gone through and platinumed it already, so he'll give some of his impressions on the game. We'll keep it still spoiler free, as we did a couple weeks ago when we talked about it. But we'll get some new God of War Ragnarok thoughts. And then Frank's also going to fill us in on some of the other games he's been playing in his absence, including Life is Strange True Colors, which I am glad to chat about because it was one of my favorite games of last year. Barring the 400 hours I put into Final Fantasy XIV, it would have been my game of the year last year, but Endwalker eked it out with all of the other Final Fantasy XIV backing it. And Frank also Road 96, which sounds like it's going to be a Game of the Year contender for him when we do that in a few weeks' time. And then for me, the only thing I really hopped into was after Cameron talked about it on last week's show, I hopped in and played some Coral Island. There was a Let's Play that I did for the first couple days of it, and then I basically played through another couple weeks worth of the game last night. So yeah, shout out to Coral Island. So that's kind of the topics of discussion today. Before we hop into that, if you like the show, remember to like, subscribe, rate, review, share the podcast everywhere you can. It helps us out, helps get new ears and eyes on the show, and we very much appreciate it. Ring notification bells, all those fun things that everybody on YouTube or podcasts tell you to do. So yeah, let's kick things off with some more God of War Ragnarok talk. Cameron, since you are still the like early one kind of in it, I'll kind of let you kind of give your first impressions on the game, and then Frank can jump in with some of his full game thoughts, again spoiler free, and if I have anything to add I will.
The first thing I'm going to say is that when God of War 2018 came out, there was a very unique set of opinions that I read that were critical of the game, that brought up a lot of aspects about Kratos as a character. We talked about it when we first talked about it, which was like, is Kratos better? Barrett Courtney from Kind of Funny did an amazing breakdown of Kratos as a character and how he's evolved over time. And a lot of the criticisms of 2018's Kratos was like, not enough had been done to satisfy a lot of people's feelings about the game. A lot of talk about, I often found it's similar to kind of like my feelings on Homecoming. Specifically Spider-Man Homecoming. I should specify that. Just Homecoming in general as a concept, no. Mm-hmm. But Spider-Man Homecoming is that there is kind of like this unspoken phantom character in the film that feels that like answers like, why is Aunt May upset that he doesn't answer his phone? Like, where is a lot of this panic or a lot of this, like these feelings that there's another character in this home that is not talked about? And as somebody who has experienced loss relatively recently, losing my foster mother and kind of like having a different perspective on that, of kind of like, you always kind of have, even after people are gone, they still have a place at your home and in your heart. And it can be comforting sometimes, but it can also make things difficult. And going back and watching people replay God of War 2018, I did not take the time to do that this year before Ragnarok came out, mainly because I was crossing my fingers hoping that I get that, whatever that prediction that was on whatever show I was on with Trevor, where I said it's not coming out this year. Totally wrong. I lost it. We're good.
Let's say it was a Portillo's bet, and you owe me Portillo's.
That's fair. Yeah, like there is something very, like just very unique about 2018 of having kind of this phantom character that's Kratos. It's very clear that Faye's death in 2018, God of War, was just extremely fresh for a character who has the kind of background that Kratos has to be a comfort to his son after his son's basically lost the only person in his life that's been a source of comfort and guidance. Because it's very clear that Kratos and he do not have that rapport. And it's a game about establishing that rapport. And what I've loved seeing in God of War Ragnarok is that exact criticism immediately addressed. The rapport between Kratos and Atreus is they are closer than ever. And it's because they've become so close over the last couple years that since the end of God of War 2018, where they went through a lot of like life-changing stuff. Atreus and Kratos found out a lot of stuff about Faye that they didn't know. That was this journey was kind of Faye's lesson of like kind of teaching them who she was like very much seeming inadvertent, but at the same time being very direct and being part of a prophecy. And it also reveals that, you know, some prophecy stuff has kind of gone astray. Primarily because of who the like a character is in this game. This Loki character. Who is Loki is kind of like this question that's brought up by Atreus at the beginning of the game. And it shows that there's been some deviations from the unbreakable predictions of the giants of the Jotuns, as it were. But it leads us up into a very compelling story and narrative. And I'm really glad to see that some of my kind of like early predictions of like what Ragnarok could be have already kind of been fulfilled in a lot of ways. I won't go into specifics because we're being spoiler free, but it's great to see Atreus evolving from a sidekick character that he was in God of War 2018 to being a really fully fleshed out, robust, and developing character. This is very much more of Atreus' story than it is Kratos's, and it shows in the narrative. But it's amazing to see how much the lessons that Kratos himself learned in 2018 kind of being put into practice. They're actually being used. And because of that, Kratos is like a way more enjoyable character than I think he's ever been. Like there's so much relatable things going on in this game. And I just absolutely love it. I've had an absolute blast with it. The Leviathan axe feels better than ever with the haptic feedback on PS5. Holy crap. It's so good to know, like, when I'm hitting those R2 triggers for like if I want to throw it or if I want to charge it, I don't like it is a split second. Like it knows exactly when I cross that threshold, I'm charging it. And it's such a great feeling and moment, and combat feels better than it did the last time. The shield pairing system has evolved in a way that is just incredible. I love the aspects of it. And I love like the different shield types that you find and get. And it's been incredible. I love the aspect of, oh, how did Kratos trip and lose all of his upgrades? And it's like, nah, dude, Fimbulwinter's a bitch. Mm-hmm. It's a magical winter permanence that just fucking sucks. And everything bad, like things are just bad in it. Like it is what it is. I love that aspect of it. I love that it's this, the world is kind of like in this frozen, deteriorating state. And Atreus as a young, like I see so much of like really great stuff coming from Atreus as far as like he's at that age where he's like, I'm not, you know, the idea of like, I'm not the song, I'm not a girl, but I'm not yet a woman.
Yes, I know the song.
Yeah, it's like that for Atreus, but it's like, I'm not the god giant boy, but I'm not yet a god giant man.
Sure. Yeah.
And it's so good because they immediately just knew exactly where kind of like the weaker points of the story were. And it's like, how can we never get to see Kratos interact with his wife? She's just dead at the beginning of 2018. It's like, cool. You want to see how like grumbles she calls him Grumbles. Like that's her pet name for him is literally just teasing him for being a grumbler.
I mean, I would argue that maybe delves into a little spoiler territory, diving into some of that stuff. So maybe we will avoid some
Thank
of
you
that.
for pointing that out. I will go ahead and like.
Yeah.
We might want to edit that out.
Yeah.
Anyway.
But yes,
we may not. It's not spoilery. Too much. It does. Like you might be like, Cameron, how's that happen? It just play the game. Just play the game.
It's very early stuff, but it's
super early. That's why it wasn't even considered spoiler to me.
Yeah.
Because it's that early on. But I think like once again, they address so many things that I think were like here's the thing: when you have a game like God of War 2018 that is quintessentially a masterpiece of taking a character in a franchise and just stripping it down to its bare essentials and then rebuilding it into an epic story and awesome game. You have like the minor points of like that people can have about the game that may not be necessarily negative so much as it's a commentary and a critique of it. I think that God of War Ragnarok as a follow-up, taking care of those and approaching those head on helps it build a stronger game going forward. And I just have to say, like, just my experience playing through Ragnarok has been basically I play it until I'm too tired to keep, like, I got it on Friday. It's full disclosure, we're recording this on Sunday, but I've been playing it just like intermittently, and I play it until like I'm bleary eyed and I can't play anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And thankfully I can just hit the PlayStation button, put it into rest mode, and it'll actively kick me back in right at the moment that I was at. Thank you, modern technology. And it's been such a phenomenal experience playing through this and getting to see this groundbreaking game's of 2018's evolution into what Ragnarok is just phenomenal. And it's taken me in places that I had no idea we'd ever go to. It's taken alternative takes on the mythology of the Norse mythology that I'm very much into, but also leaving me clues and identifiers that as a big fan and a big follower of Norse mythology, I'm very keyed into like certain things and certain characters and certain names being mentioned. And I'm very fascinated by this. And it's a great message about, especially for how people who have seen conflict and trauma and the legacy that those things have, because we know that even today that trauma is genetic, like trauma gets passed on, not just like emotionally or culturally, but literally down to like the genetic level. Like they've found studies where people who have endured great trauma pass on certain like identifiers that separate them from those who haven't. And we get to see kind of like the legacy that we have built in the process of how it's being passed on. There's a great line that's not spoilery at all, but it's Atreus asks Kratos like up front, finally, just like, hey, how hard was it? Like, what was it like being trained to be a Spartan warrior? And Kratos gives a very blunt, very direct answer of it was like how awful and miserable it is, like how it's like traumatizing in a way. And Atreus goes, so like, why didn't you raise me that way? And Kratos definitively says, because I made a decision not to. And that's such an awesome moment. And it's like it's a miniature dialogue line and just like that you can randomly like stumble into at one point. It's not even
like,
a story.
yeah, as you guys, it's one of those, like, it's not a cutscene. It's just conversation that you guys are having as you're passing through some section of the game. Yeah.
Yeah. The comfort that Atreus has asking questions to Kratos, that you get kind of like the candor at the end of 2018 is even more fully enveloped here. And Atreus is asking some really like some questions that like in 2018's God of War, Kratos probably would just have been like, doesn't matter. But Kratos has learned, he's taking time. And it's like, it's such a great evolution of their relationship. And it's showing a side of Kratos that we never get to see up until 2018. And those glimpses of it that like, the hesitation moments where he's going to put his hand on Atreus' shoulder, but then stops at the beginning. Like, and then how it kind of comes full circle on like how he expresses himself. Kratos expresses himself brilliantly in this game. And to see kind of, just to see how characters how he's taken characters like Mimir and the Dwarven brothers into kind of his confidence. And, you know, they're friends, they're comrades, they're neighbors, for Mimir, like he calls Mimir brother at one point, and I was like, oh my God, like what? It's a total evolution of this character, and I've just found myself just absolutely blown away by the music, the score, there's pivotal moments that are just like very incredibly done, and also just like, hey, we are not going, like, just the way that they approach how they are gonna take you through the realms is done in such an incredible way. Also, shout out to Sungwon Cho, who plays a character who I'm not going to give a name or spoil it, but he plays a character. He's one of my favorite like Vine people coming after Vine. He's a voice actor. He got to start by doing like dumb video game related skits on Vine, and he's just one.
Talking about,
yeah, Sungwon Cho. He's so good. And he's just absolutely perfect at the role that he's in. Mm-hmm. And the fact that it's like a quasi recast.
Yeah, it's definitely
they implement it into like the meta narrative to it. It's so good. It's so good.
I remember that popping up. I'm like, wait, but this was played like it's a character that it's in the first game, but like you could completely miss. I mean, I'll throw out that like the Ratataskar that like Troy Baker voices in the first game. When you meet like a Ratataskar in this game, they like call it out, which I appreciate.
Yeah.
Very, very like.
Oh, he's like an aspect of, and it's literally, what is it? It's bitter
Ratataskar.
Yeah, bitter Ratataskar. I freaking love that, and all like because
he came back and voiced new things for it, Troy Baker. So it's not like a full recasting. He's still in the game, but yeah, he just has significantly less to do because he was also one of Thor's kids in the first game, in addition to that. Yeah, that summon basically that like you could play through the whole game and not use that summon, and so you would never hear the foul-mouthed little squirrel thing.
Getting his foul-mouthed lines when you're like just walking around and just hearing him just be like bitter Ratataskar. It's great.
Yeah. Frank, I want to throw it to you for some of your kind of like broad impressions of the game. You, like me, as I said earlier, fully platinumed at this point, so you've played the game, you've seen pretty much everything it has to offer. Obviously, you going for the platinum liked it enough. So yeah, what did you think of God of War Ragnarok?
That's not fair. That's not a fair assessment though, because Frank will platinum games he doesn't even like.
True. Yeah.
Like the thing is, it's like, oh, you clearly liked it, you platinumed it. I've said that to Frank before, and he responded, I forgot what game it is, but he was like, not really.
Sometimes the trophies are just easy, you know, or fair. Like it's just like, I got nothing to do. I'll knock this out. Or sometimes I'll even be like trying to level up my little like level. And I'm just like.
Frank once told me that he literally finished the game because he saw how close he was to platinuming it. And even though he didn't really want to beat the game, he did it anyway just to hit the platinum.
I think that is true.
So yeah, what are your God of War Ragnarok thoughts, Frank?
I think it's incredible. Like, and hope I was super. This has been my most anticipated game for like a while, and it's funny for me too because like I remember when the 2018 one came out. Like I've played all the old God Wars, and I liked those, and I even liked the story and some of the things they did. Even though Kratos is like a wildly different character, and obviously the main thing you associate him with is just anger and yelling and the Calliope. You know, like
Calliope, Zeus, Athena. Yeah,
and so like. It was interesting where 2018 when that was coming out, I wasn't particularly super excited. I was like, oh, it's a core PlayStation franchise. I'm definitely going to play it, but I didn't pick it up like right when it came out. But then watching the like intro bit when someone was playing it, I was like, this is incredible. Like, and I had to go in and just dive in and pick it up. And the first game in 2018 like blew me away. And like, I think like it did to a lot of people. And so I've been so excited for this like sequel and seeing what they're going to do to it. And I think like at no point did I think it was going to be bad, but I'm happy to say that I think it's like just as good as the first one, if not better in some places. And I think it's like it's just they're firing on all cylinders in like a very impressive way for this game, where it's not even just, oh, the graphics are good or the gameplay is good. It's like the story is great, and it's not even just the story, it's the actual writing and the acting and the way they direct cutscenes, and the way it's like all still super cinematic, and they're still doing that one shot
Mhm.
camera from like the first game, which is just kind of like, it's so interesting though, because you just to think like, yeah, well, that's what this is now, but I'm like, that's still incredibly difficult to
Yeah.
try to make happen. um and that's like I think they have addressed some of the issues that the first game had, because like the first game, I think, and I've said it a lot on our shows and even just in our private conversations, of like, I think that first game's a masterpiece, and but it's not perfect. Like it has things that I think are like kind of issues with it, and then this game tries to address a lot of those. And the another thing, I kind of Cam touched on this a bit too, but it is such a good sequel to God of War 2018, because this is not me just trying to throw strays at like other games, but like in Uncharted, like 1, 2, and 3, Nate is just Nate, and you go on these adventures, and it's, oh, you're here having a new adventure with Nate, and like there is some development and story stuff there, but this is like this is such a good sequel, where like the things that happened in the first game had a direct impact on these characters, and they have grown,
Mhm.
and they have like when kind of Cam is talking about like Kratos is different, and it's not just because they decided to write him different. Like he has grown because of the journey he went on in 2018, and I think that's so incredible and well done. And it's kind of thinking about other games, it's like, yeah, it's hard to even do that, or hard to even think of other games that have like nailed that so well, where it's not even just that, oh, he we decided like people didn't like him, so we had to change up how he is. It's like, oh man, they actually were like, no, he's actually grown a lot, and he's just like a better person and like a better father. And that's like such a great, I think, element to this game, and like seeing so many of the interactions he has with Atreus and some of these other characters, I think, is incredible. And I love the like familial themes that kind of run throughout this game, that it's so interesting to kind of see like some of the threads that they kind of weave through, where you can kind of see like similarities between like him and other people, and things that like, and then kind of seeing like how like familiar relationships can affect people, and it has kind of this theme that they say a lot too, of like, be better,
Mhm.
and that's something that I think is like really incredible. And I think like with the first game, I think I kind of like the overall like A to B plot more, of like the father son journey and kind of getting to that accomplishment of climbing the mountain at the end. But I think this game's story is still incredible, and I think it tells it even probably better, where like I was so, there's times where I'm playing the game and I'm like, I just want to get to the next cutscene. Like these enemies are in my way, like, because I just want to like continue this story. And even kind of like Cam said too, like there was a couple late nights with this. Like one time I played till like 4 in the morning, and I didn't mean to. It's just like I looked at the clock and it's like, oh, it's midnight. Oh, it's 1. Now it's 3. Now it's 4. And I'm just like, it's always like, oh, one more thing, one more thing, one more thing. Like, and then something happens and I'm like, oh my God, that's incredible. Now I got to keep going. Like, and I think like I think the whole game's amazing, and I still think this is like a 10 out of 10 for me. Like I just like I think it's another masterpiece, and I'm excited to see like whatever the studio does going forward, whatever that is. Like it's such a talented group of people, is really what I always think about too, is like this is like, it's just like these games like 2018 and this one are on like another level.
Mhm. Yeah, I think one of the things that both of you kind of like touch on a little bit, that is something that has just stuck with me even more so in the couple weeks since beating it now. This game, more than any game I can think of, took all of the feedback around the first game and said, okay, yeah, we're going to fix all of those things. And I think like, so it does elevate, and that's from the shortcomings of Kratos's character in the first game, and never from like Christopher Judge's performance, just like Kratos was a very cold character by design. But getting to see, I think part of it is the way this game, and again, like spoiler free, the way this game like fleshes out the rest of the cast also means that it fleshes out how Kratos interacts with a lot of other people, versus the last game that was very like, all right, he's just with Atreus the entire time, and occasionally, little bits with Freya and little bits with the Holder brothers, Brock and Sindri. But like this game like lets him builds on all of the relationships that he's already established with those people and continues them now, and to the point that Cameron said earlier, like Mimir always calls Kratos and Atreus brother and stuff like that, but when Kratos says it back, it is like like they have a relationship that has continued to blossom in the time since we left them in the first game. That's really cool. That's really great. And so I think like it exceeds in kind of its growth there. And then to the points you bring up there, Cam, like the evolution of the combat system, I think is also another strength of the game, where it still very much feels and plays like the first game, but like just minor little things make it feel better, make parries, feel better and stuff like that. And the like one of the things that I in a replay will try and like experiment with more is the other like runic attacks or something like that, or the other like just all of the different skills that you kind of add as you level up and stuff. Because I very much got stuck in like this is the build that works for me, so this is just how I'm going to like play the game. And so like I had a bunch of them that I never touched, never used, and so I want to kind of like go back now and explore more and see how the different combat stylings will open things up or change things for me and stuff like that. So I think that's another just area of growth in the game as a whole. So yeah, it's very much like this is more than any other game, the game that like is the we always hope that like a first game is good, comes out great, and we're like, cool, I can't wait to see how they improve upon that in the sequel. This improves upon everything leaps and bounds. This is the game that is now that like pinnacle of like, I hope they God of War Ragnarok it for the sequel.
I will say also, one thing that I forgot about until you brought it up with items and equipment and stuff is I love the changes they made to equipment and item stuff, where you're not just picking up just like extra armor pieces along the way, or you can, but like it's not randomized loot garbage.
Mm-hmm.
You don't pick up random garbage anymore. Everything has a point to it. It's not a collectathon of like, how many vases can I smash? How many things can I do? Because now it's just all about, there's a small list of resources. You get those resources depending on the realms you're in. And then there's half silver, which is the currency everywhere. And like that's done, streamlined it incredibly well. Because that was actually like a systems criticism that I think a lot of people, myself included, had, which was why, like, I don't want to pick up just like, oh, like I have like 6 copies of this armor. Like that's just not the case anymore. Everything's much more unique.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, everything feels a lot more specialized in the armor and weapon selections. Also, I love the way... Yeah.
Sorry, I was just going to say, like, additionally, the like you pick up gear and then you can just continue to level that gear up throughout the game. And it's basically like the stats are based on the level of the gear. So like if you have a level 6 thing, all of the level 6 things will have the same total buff points, but they're spread out differently between vitality and strength and defense and all those different stats. But like it, if you switch between different pieces of like 6 level gear, your overall like the top left corner level of your character is not going to change at all because it's all like leveled out amongst itself. So yeah, I appreciated that of like, okay, I like the vibe that this gear gives me, and I can just kind of continue boosting that all the way through to the end game, as opposed to having to like switch different gear pieces every couple hours of the game or something like that.
I got the Niflheim waist piece, and I love how it kind of power clashes with the Radiant gear that I have. Because I haven't fully leveled up the Radiant gear where it's past its default look yet, but the Radiant gear is from you pick it up in some extra chests when you go do the side quest in Afelheim. So
okay,
it's some cool stuff. Sorry if that's slight spoilery, but like it's as far as like naming the realms that are in.
I mean, we talked in the first game, and one of the things they've like really touted about this game was that you go to all the realms in this game.
And going back to the gear kind of thing, like I did really like that you can. It is kind of I like the changes they made it to it, especially because like I used one piece of armor for like most of the game, like or one armor set, I should say. Like I got the full set, and it's the
Wait,
one
wait,
that you
wait.
collect
This is an
through a
important
side
question.
quest.
Yeah,
Mhm.
okay. But I have an important question for you though, Frank. Fully armored or just shoulder strap armor?
So I do prefer just the shoulder pauldron, especially for Kratos. Like to me,
Yeah.
that's like what I associate with Kratos. And then
Hot
in
bod
this,
dad Kratos, yeah.
I ended
Free
up
that
using
nipple
the
up.
full like chest armor because that's like the one that I got from doing that one side quest in a certain area, and upgrading it. It just always looked super cool. Where it was like this red and silver, and it just like look like when it's especially when it's like maxed out, it just has like a super cool look. And then event in the end game, I like used it for like from when I got it to the actual beating the game, and then I had to like basically in the end game, I needed to continue just like kind of buffing myself, so I ended up getting like a better end game like armor set, and then up maxing that out, and that had like because Trevor's right about like the level, but like that's some of the armors do have like better stats or like
Mhm.
higher stat buffs even for like your strength and defense, because like that one that I had maxed out at like 77 strength or something, and the one I ended up equipping had like 90 strength when it was like maxed out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that was just like I need those little minute edges in the end game because there's like some tough fights when you start getting towards the end.
Yeah.
Shout out to I love it. They brought so luck is once again a stat in the game, but
Mm.
there's a great little like one of those wandering moments where like dialogue is just happening and Mimir's talking about like the aspects of like the soul, and he goes and then luck,
Hmm.
and Atreus says something about to Kratos about luck, or no, Mimir, one of them says something to Kratos about being luck, and Kratos goes, I never rely on luck. And it's like, and I'm like, dude, I literally just buffed a piece
Yeah.
that buffed your luck
I was
stat.
gonna
Don't
say,
even pull that on
Not
me.
according to my build, you don't.
Yeah, not
I was
according to my
gonna say,
build.
I use that a lot too, like because
Yeah,
there's all
'cause-
these other moves that like, oh, you have a chance to become more stronger or do whatever, and then my luck ended up being like super high, and I was getting those like all the time.
Yeah, because I want my weapons to go glowy glowy. Like I want that to happen, and and some of that relies on luck. And yeah, Kratos, bullshit. I definitely use luck on you, bro.
Mhm.
No, like I just love it. Also, shout out to like the poetry stuff being like those Easter eggs.
Yeah.
That's
I
great.
It took me so
Yeah.
long to realize that. And
Same.
like I finally looked at one, I was like, that doesn't seem like it's describing anything Norse wise.
I haven't read it. I haven't read any of them. I picked up one of the books
oh, you
and it
looked
had
at the book.
it
Got
had
it.
something on the cover.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh.
Yeah. Yeah. All of the, yeah. Once you start reading them, they're all fun little tie-ins to Easter eggy things.
Just what a wonderful, like what an absolutely wonderful game that has just so much going for it.
Yeah, they're
Well,
very
and I
much in the
even-
spirit of the rift gun of like Ratchet and Clank of like,
Yeah.
yeah, we're gonna just celebrate all things PlayStation by doing this. I think like I've liked seeing Ghost of Tsushima has that at the end of the
Mhm.
at the
Yeah.
end of the game too, of like the celebration, the origami things. So like I love all of the like big PlayStation studios like patting each other on the back with these things. It's just a lot of fun. Frank, any other
And
thoughts there?
with the poems, I even love the extra kind of like layer of depth it gives you with him talking to Mimir about how
Mhm.
he actually likes poetry
Yeah.
and how like poetry was huge in in Greece.
When Mimir says, I'm surprised you like gathering up all this poetry. And he goes, poetry was an important part of my culture.
Hmm.
And it's like, it's true. But like
Yeah.
but if you didn't know Grecian culture, you wouldn't assume somebody like Kratos would appreciate poetry.
Yeah.
But it's like when he tells the story of his friend Atreus that he named Atreus after.
Yeah.
He tells that story, and it's a story about like it's a wonderful, compelling little story, a narrative that he tells his son. But it's like, yeah, like he's from a culture of great storytellers and great like, but all he would like the God of War games haven't really focused on that so much, and so I love seeing these little small explorations of his stuff.
Mhm.
And the sentimentality that Kratos has in this game is like off the charts. This game,
Yeah.
and I'm freaking loving it.
Yeah.
Like he's still holding on to Faye's ash bag, like the
Mhm.
bag of her ashes. He's still holding on to it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that is just such a like, if you don't know or you didn't pick up on that, like it's easy to pass up. But he's like when he's also like there's moments where like it comes into play if you don't, but if
I mean,
you miss it, you wouldn't see
it's
it.
how the game opens is him like
Oh
holding
yeah,
and
no,
cherishing that ash
very,
bag,
very
so-
much that's how the game opens.
Yeah.
But like there's other moments when I was in Alfheim, like
Yeah.
there was a moment where it's like I didn't realize it until the camera kind of panned back and his hand like moved away from it, and I'm like, oh my gosh, he was like touching it
Yeah.
when he was like doing this. And it's really great, like the sentimentality or the sentimentality, as well as the just like overall like Kratos has really become like come into his own as a father, as a character, and it's just so brilliantly expressed in these wonderful moments. And like you see the trouble he's having also. It's like, because it's not like, oh, I'm emotionally like frozen as a person because I was a Spartan, God of War 1 through 3 plus the PSP game. Like all this awful
Plus
things happened to
Ascension.
me.
We
So
always forget Ascension.
Yeah.
I even
That's the first thing
when,
that came to my
when
mind,
Frank
too.
was like, I played all the games. I like in my head, I'm like, even Ascension, because nobody played
No,
Ascension.
I haven't.
Exactly.
Nope,
Yeah. But yeah.
Ascension is the
That's the time rewinding one. It was like it was on the PS3 one after God of War 3.
Yeah.
oh, who played that? Nobody
Exactly.
played that.
And it
Exactly.
also had a like God of War multiplayer, but yeah, nobody played it.
Yes, it did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
nobody played that game. No, the PSP one though is the one where they have like the dude who looks like Gerard Butler's his brother.
Well, they had
Demos.
Chains of Olympus
Demos.
and Ghost of Sparta. Were the
Yeah.
two PSP games, or the
Ghost of
like
Sparta was-
in the I think they're in a PS3 collection, which is now probably also
Yes.
a PS4 collection or something like that. But yes,
Yeah.
all
Yeah,
them
so like
God of War games.
this like super traumatic dude, and it's like, oh no, but he actually like he's like the times now where he and Atreus are not connecting. It's not because of Kratos' not being emotionally available. It's because Atreus is growing up,
Mhm.
and it's the trials and tribulations of having a teenage son, and having a teenage son who is feeling this call to adventure and this call to destiny that this game really centers around. That, you know, he like Kratos is doing what he can to try to like guide him as best he can, but at the same time give him the freedom to like to really be his own person. And it's like it's this awesome dichotomy of this push and pull in their relationship they really didn't have in the first game, that they are just really exercising super well in the beginning hours of the game that I'm in now. Like we're at a point like this like there's certain things that happen in the story beats that like really test Kratos' patience.
Mhm.
And it's done in such a spectacular way of like just it's just done so brilliantly well. I cannot emphasize how much I have loved sinking my teeth into this game and just really enjoying it. Getting to finally really enjoy it has just been an absolute treat.
Yeah, it's definitely a winner. And I look forward to when we get to do an eventual spoiler cast on it and talk about all of the things we want to talk about, because there's lots in there. One other thing that I'll weigh in on that is spoiler free, but if you have played through and beaten the game, I encourage people to go and like find some of like the writing and stuff that is more spoiler driven. Like there is specifically a side quest in the game that's, you know, it's a, in the context of the game, in the grander scale and stuff like that, it's kind of a nothing quest, but like there's like a side quest where you go through the realms and you're collecting like ingredients for a meal. And I read a piece that was basically like the making of that side quest and the pitch and the team behind it and stuff like that. And it has like an incredibly like real personal stakes for team members at Sony Santa Monica, with specifically with regards to a team member that has passed. But like, so like it, like reading that piece recontextualized the whole thing for me after the fact and stuff like that. And so there's like cool little things like that. Like unrelated, but I saw there was a similar story for like a Midnight Suns thing in the Midnight Suns game about like a guy who basically was like terminally ill, and one of his like make a wish kind of wishes was to play Midnight Suns, and the team put together a build for him to play of like the first act, knowing that he probably wasn't going to live to see the game's release and stuff like that. And so just really cool game stories sometimes that happen that are stories above and beyond the game as well. So
Sometimes the
that's-
best stories in games are about the making and like the people behind the games.
Yeah.
So
No,
Yes, shout out
and
to God of War Ragnarok. We will eventually, of course, do a spoiler cast. Whether we wait for Logan to finish it or not, who knows? Probably not. But we will definitely
Get wrecked, Logan.
Once Cameron has done it, we will definitely have some good chats about God of War Ragnarok, and hopefully we can get you back for it, Frank.
oh yeah.
So Frank, speaking of games that I love, let's go to Life is Strange True Colors, which I sang from the rooftops last year, and none of y'all played it, so it did not do well in our game of the year. I think it barely.
This would be a perfect time for me to show you that I still have it like on my desk, and I still haven't played it, but unfortunately, it's packed away in a box now.
Yeah, there you go. But tell me, and we can again stay spoiler free in case Cameron ever does take me up on and actually play through the game. But what did you think of Life is Strange True Colors, Frank?
I really liked it, and I had kind of had like a little bit of it spoiled from me, and that's kind of my own fault for like not necessarily avoiding some of those things. And then even like when I watched the trailer for it, when I was pulling footage for our Game of the Year video, I saw something, and I was like, and I asked you about it. I was like, "Does this happen?" And you're like, "Yeah, that happens." And I'm like, "Oh wow!" Like,
yeah, I mean, it's interesting because like as you're talking about, I'm like, I mean, there's like a spoilery thing that happens at the end of the first episode. But yeah, the game trailers, like the first announcements of the game kind of like spoiled that, and it's more about like what happens after that. So I like even that I don't necessarily treat as spoilery, but I can appreciate that.
but like I still enjoyed the story and like my time going through it, because something I think we've talked about a bit before is like I'm not the biggest fan of the first Life is Strange, like, and I don't think it's like an outright like terrible game, and it is kind of one of those games like Cam was talking about, like I platinumed it. Like I have the
Mhm.
platinum for that, I got all the collectibles or whatever, but
Wait,
like
you said it about Life is Strange 1?
yeah, I'm not a huge fan of Life is Strange 1. And
Wow.
to
Okay.
me, a lot of the writing comes off as like, how do you do, fellow kids? It's somebody who's like, it's like older people who are writing younger people, and I was in the exact age bracket for those characters.
That's
And
fair.
it's one of those
That's
things where
fair.
I was like, we don't talk like this. Why would we do this? And then people's response to me is like, no, you do talk like that. And I'm like, no, we don't. They're like, no, but like, okay, like, and I don't know, man. It's
Frank,
like,
as
again,
an
I'm not
adult who
saying
played that game, that's how kids talked when I was that age.
well, and that's why it's like, again, I don't think it's like a terrible game. I just especially for how much other people seem to love it. I definitely didn't really connect with me, and I think it is somewhat almost like an age thing, because I know Barrett Courtney, who were the same age, and he also didn't really like it and kind of feels the same way. But then everybody who's maybe a little bit older, it was like, oh, it's great, like. And I just think it's like it's just an interesting thing I've kind of noticed about that game. But again, like I don't think it's like terrible. It's like, and especially like that's like their first outing, and everybody's first. It's kind of like what Cam and I talked earlier this year about the first Bayonetta. It's like I don't think the first Bayonetta is that great either. Again, it's not terrible, but it has a lot of issues. But that's your first time as a studio trying to do something, and you can kind of iterate and kind of improve upon it in the future. And so, by kind of that's my kind of history with this, is because then I've never played any of the other Life is Stranges after that, and even like Tell Me Why, which I was kind of interested in. I still had never got around to. But then with this, this is the first time they've been able to kind of fully hook me back in. Of like, this seems very interesting, and I like the characters. Like I like is it Alex you play as? Alex Chen?
Yep.
Do I have that right?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's been a little bit since I played it, so I'm a bit rusty. But like I like her as a character, and I like a lot of some of the other characters that are like in this small town, and I actually like the small town vibes too. Of like, I'm not somebody that's ever lived in a small town. Like I've always lived in big cities, but like it's a cool little like small town where you get to meet all these different characters and like explore kind of their relationships. And I know something I had heard about this game going in before it too is I like how like they do a lot of cool, interesting things and like moments and set pieces, and the way they even just elevate that like adventure game kind of like gameplay, where like, oh yeah, this whole segment takes place in this area, but you could just leave and go explore the town, and something is happening on the other side of the town that they're not even going to like tell you about. And like that's interesting, and it's interesting like evolutions and trying to like develop your relationship with these like some of these characters. And like they totally got me too, because there's like a cool record store with like a radio station in it, and like the girl that runs that radio station I think is like super awesome. So like I totally loved like that aspect of it, and kind of like building a relationship with like some of the people in this town. And then there's a lot of like everybody has kind of like their own story of things they're like coming to terms with and like dealing with. And even if they're coming, even if part of their thing is just that they want to get out of this town, you know,
Mhm.
and they want to go like actually explore the world and see things. And like, I think a lot of that was really cool. And, um, I even was like I told Trevor beforehand, like I played it on PS5, and then afterwards, like since it's such a light release year, and I was kind of just in the mood for like, yeah, just kind of letting the story play out and being able to make decisions. I went and I played. I downloaded the PS4 version, and just like I got like a double platinum. And it's funny though because I didn't make like radically different decisions. I just kind of fixed like one or two things I kind of fucked up on my first playthrough because I was just doing it blind.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna ask is if you did like try and go for wildly different things. One thing I want to jump in on. Life is Strange: True Colors is made by Deck Nine,
Okay.
whereas Don't Nod made Life is Strange 1 and 2, and then went on to tell me why. Deck Nine did Life is Strange Before the Storm, so they did like the prequel thing. But so this still is their like second go at Life is Strange, really. And Steph, the girl at the record store, is basically like a carryover character from the Life is Strange Before the Storm stuff.
Oh,
So,
nice.
and yeah, she's my favorite character of the game, probably easily.
Yeah.
And I think they recognize that as well. I don't know if you played the DLC, the wavelengths stuff, but basically like it's the year, like you play 4 episodes the year before Alex comes to town from the perspective of Steph. And those are largely like you're just kind of in the record store, so it's like a spring, summer, winter, fall kind of like, but you kind of get her year of she's just moved to town, she moves into the record store, kind of takes over, and then gets more and more comfortable with the job and the people around her over the course of the year. So it's a fun little like prequel for her story as well. So yeah.
And that's something I might even go back and check out too, because like she was definitely like my favorite part of it. And then that's also why like in because I know we're not even doing spoilers, so I don't even want to get too deep into it. But that's why even when I replayed it, it's like, oh well, I could follow this other path, but I'm like, oh screw this guy, I'm just still gonna go with Steph still.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. I'm glad you liked it. It's definitely a game that I've looked at a couple times this year and thought, yeah, maybe now is the time I'll boot up the PS4 version and go through and play it again and get the platinum. And I've not, but years still not over. So maybe I will before the year comes, because I do have to put together my like best platinums of 2022, as I've done the last couple of years. So that'd be a I think that may have been my favorite platinum of last year. I think I may have given it like that award in lieu of, since it didn't get my game of the year. But yeah,
and
Life is Strange: True Colors, real good stuff.
and in that like in the platinum respect, it's a good platinum too. Like obviously a lot of these like kind of narrative kind of adventure games are, and like I've played most of the Telltale games, and that's another one where even this year we won't dive deep into it, but I went through my backlog of the Telltale games I have not played, which is only Guardians of the Galaxy and the final 2 seasons of The Walking Dead. So I still need to play the 2 seasons of The Walking Dead, but I played their Guardians of the Galaxy game, and I'm like, this is not that great. And especially in comparison, like Life is Strange: True Colors is like leagues above
Mhm.
that, just even in the narrative and the decisions, and even the fact that it actually runs well.
You as I know you are a D&D fan. What did you think of the LARP nature? It's we don't need to get like too specific into it, but there's a like one of the big like set pieces of the game, I would argue, is kind of this like LARP session that they have in the game. Do you have some fun with that?
Yeah, I thought that was super cool. And again, that's kind of one of my things I was saying there of like the way they come up with interesting things to do that are like not just, oh, I'm just in this town. It's like the whole town is like getting involved in this like special kind of thing that they're doing. And it's cool to instead then you go to the record shop and it's like, oh, this is the place you get potions and like stuff like, and it's like everyone has like a role that they're like acting in. And I think that part of the game is super interesting and super fun, and I like even loved like being able to just like it's interesting to even replay because like you can I don't know if this is getting too much into spoilers, but there's like random encounters even, and you can actually fight through them, but then there's like items you can get that just kind of forego the encounter, and it's
Mhm.
like it makes that interesting when you can kind of like go through that and like even doing that part twice but kind of doing it differently. was still like interesting, and I think that part's a ton of fun, and it helps them kind of have this like dynamic sort of game where it's not just all talking and walking around and kind of doing things. It's definitely like an interesting thing that we haven't really seen before in a lot of these other like narrative adventure games.
Yeah. Cool. Cam, you ever gonna sit down and play this one, or you still too afraid?
Yeah, I
of it?
will. No, I'll play it.
All right.
I just haven't gotten around to it. There's been other things I can play.
Yeah, that's fair. Well, when you do, I will be glad to sit there and chat about it with you. So Frank, tell me about your last game that you wanted to chat about today. Road 96 is another one that came out earlier this year. Tell us about this one.
Yeah, so I think this game is actually amazing, and I think it's actually really underrated, especially because like I have barely heard anybody ever talk about this game or like what it's doing. And I think it had kind of one of those weird like split releases where it came out on PC at like the end of last year, and it finally came out on consoles at the beginning of this year. And like the trailers for it, when we would watch some of those conferences, I forget what one it was like announced or shown at. I think it was one of the Xbox shows. Like it looked really interesting and really cool, but I don't even know if they did like a perfect job of showing off like what the game actually is, because I was like, once I actually dove in and started playing it, I was actually surprised at like some of the different elements it has, because it almost has, I don't like want to spoil too much, but it almost comes off to me as a little bit like roguish or like roguelite, where like, because the whole story is like you're teenagers who are trying to like escape the country you live in and cross the border into another country that will be safer for you, because of some like there's a lot of like political things going on and even political messaging, and you can even have an influence on the world through your actions and things, even dialogue you say to people. And it's like so interesting of like you are on this kind of path making these decisions where it's like, okay, I'm going to be this kid, and it drops you into a certain part of the world, and then you're like, cool, you're 1,000 miles from the border, how are you going to get there? And it's like, oh, I'm hitchhiking, I'm going to ride the bus, oh, I found keys, I'm going to drive a car. And you're constantly getting, everything you decide to do is affecting the world and the gameplay and how your individual story for that person comes out. And I've had, out of the different characters I played as, I had such wildly different experiences where like there's times I made it and I crossed the border. There's times my character got killed and robbed. And like there was one time where I made it to the border, but I had no stamina left. So I literally passed out on the side of the road and the police arrested me. And like, that's the thing is, it's like, yeah, like they talked about how there's like 100 or 1,000 or whatever different scenes, but they really like, it has the most influence of like the decisions you make actually are mattering to a like like even like minor things like that, like, oh, you didn't eat enough, you didn't have enough money, so you didn't get enough food, so you don't have any stamina, so you passed out. Like, and it's just crazy where, and because even just making it to the border isn't like a done thing there, you need to figure out how are you going to cross the border into this other country when they're like looking for people doing this, like. And like I feel like, and it's a hard thing because I feel like even the cool, super cool things I can point out or even story elements, I feel like it almost like I don't want to ruin it, because like when going in blind, it's like a lot of these different things surprise me. But there's like main characters you meet, but you're not like the main character, especially because your character is constantly like changing. So they're telling you these interesting stories through these people that are kind of like the main characters, and you're meeting them as different people, and you get to see their story kind of continue and evolve. And sometimes they even talk about how like, oh, and I met this person and they actually like helped me with this and that made me think this way. And like, you know, like you get to see their little like story evolutions through the lens of like meeting multiple people over the course of like a month or whatever, like the game takes place in, because time kind of goes by as you're making your kind of runs through the world.
It's on Game Pass, and I just started downloading it. So
yeah,
you convinced me. It sounds awesome.
I think you'd really like it.
I was looking it up. It got announced at the 2020 Game Awards, and it's a game that I have routinely confused with As Dusk Falls, which was the game that came out earlier this year that has the Alex Van Aken looking character.
As like I was about to say, shout out to his debut, Alex Van Aken.
And then also the Open Roads game, which was also debuted at that Game Awards, which is the next Fulbright game, which is a like mother-daughter road trip. So like these three, And I wouldn't even say As Dusk Falls is like a road trip game, but it definitely like the beginning of it is like you're on a road trip and then shit pops off. And so I think like the visuals and the like road tripness of it just kind of like kept all of those games in my mind. So and there have been like times where I'd looked at like Road 96 and because it was on Game Pass and was like, I'm going to download that and I'm going to do that for a let's play on, a Tuesday or Thursday or something like that. And then something else would come up and I just never circle back around to it. So yeah, I'll definitely have to like circle back and try and check it out. Because yeah, you've done a good job kind of like selling it on like some of the cool aspects of the game. I think it's interesting, especially like right after talking about Life is Strange, where you were like, yeah, I just kind of mostly played through that game the second time the same way. Whereas like for this one, you did go out and you found like completely different paths that you could take and the different ways that affected your story and your outcome and all that stuff. What's like, how long is like a run of the game?
I would say it's about like an hour,
Okay.
because the whole game has like kind of like your multiple runs are kind of built into like one playthrough of the game, because it's like there's like about a month up until election day, and that's why like when you play as one character and then you go through their whole story, it lets you kind of do that, and then if whatever happens to them, whether they kind of make it or don't, when that character's story is kind of over, when you go into your next one, it'll like fast forward like a week or a couple days or anything like that. So I had like 8 run throughs with different characters in my kind of like one ultimate playthrough. And in that, I was able to see most of the kind of a lot of the interactions and different things that like the other characters they kind of introduce you to will have like a percentage of how much of their story you have seen. And I got 100% on like most of those, but I missed like the last of like 1 or 2 of them. So that even made me want to almost go back. I know that probably sounds a bit complicated but when you start playing it, it'll make sense.
Mm-hmm.
But then like I think each kind of characters, when you pick them and you're trying to get to the board, I think it takes about an hour. But you can have it to be shorter, because there's times, like I said, I didn't make it, and sometimes I made mistakes really early on that ended up just like you have bad runs. And that's what made me think of it. It's like it has these like interesting roguelike elements where like there's times where I ended my run being super rich and having a ton of money that I had just encountered throughout the world. And like I don't want to spoil too much, but at one point I ended up at this like carnival that was along the way, and there was a guy who tries to like it's one of those like games with the ball in the cup where he's like moving it around.
Mm-hmm.
And I sat there and I kept playing it, and it just gets faster and faster and faster, and it gets ridiculously fast. But that's the kind of thing I'm really good at, is just keeping track of that. So I fleeced this dude out of like hundreds of dollars instead of where he's trying to fleece you out of your money, to the point where he told me I could not play the game anymore, and he like packed up his stuff and like left. But then that made my character in that run, like I was so rich, you didn't have to worry, because part of the game is you not having like, you're struggling, you're trying to figure out how you're going to get there. And that's why sometimes you just have to hitchhike or just walk on the side of the road. And I even love like if you try to hitchhike, somebody doesn't always pick you up. Sometimes it just cuts back to you standing there with your thumb, and then you're like, okay. And then I'm like, I guess I'm walking, and you're just walking through the desert. Like, and that's why I'm like, it's so interesting, all these little decisions you make. And I can even trace back like when I had bad runs where I'm like, if I would have did this, or if I did this. And then there was definitely one time like I had just had the worst RNG where I'm like, I have nothing I can do. Like I'm broke, hungry, walking through the desert. Like I got nothing I can do on this run. Like, but it's just really incredible. Like the way they just were able to take your decisions and make them like matter, especially because I watched a little bit of somebody else play it, and it's like, oh, that conversation I had with that character we had while I was driving a car, and I picked them up as like a hitchhiker. But then when I played in my game, I took the bus and we met on the bus. But then you get to have like the same conversation with them, and it's like they really even crafted like different scenes in like small different ways where really like every decision kind of like matters, if that makes sense.
Very cool. Nice. Yeah, definitely have to check that out. Road 96. Cool. And you said it's still on Game Pass there, Cam?
Yes, it is.
All right. Very cool. All right. Well, the last game of today's episode is also another game we discussed last week, and that is Coral Island, which Cam sold me on last week. And so I dove in this last week's one of our Let's Plays was my first couple days with Coral Island. This is to reiterate another game in Game Pass, specifically PC Game Pass, which I did not specify in my Let's Play of it, and I don't remember if we specified it last week. But yeah, so hopped in, played a couple days of that, and then basically like continued playing a couple more weeks worth in the game. It is in-game preview, so it is like developers are still actively working on it, and you'll get like a little screen that pops up kind of the beginning anytime you log in saying like, hey, this is an indicative little thing in the bottom right corner that's like not indicative of final gameplay. I got to the first little like Cherry Blossom Festival that Cameron, you mentioned you basically had just gotten to last week, and like it does the Harvest Moon or Stardew Valley thing of like, okay, it's a big potluck, and so you can bring food and you can throw it in the pot if you want, and if you try and throw food in the pot, a little prompt comes up that's basically like, you'll be able to interact with this when the developers have added something in for you to interact with or something like that. So it's basically like, hey, this part of the game isn't ready for you to be doing the thing you're trying to do yet. And I got a kick out of that. But I went in, I've played more with like the diving element, had some fun with that. I've met just a ton more of like the more like supernatural elements. Like I went and gave offerings to the island goddess thing and started getting stuff there. And yeah, it's been fun. One of the things that I took me maybe an extra day or two to struggle with, because it's just not an element that I'm as used to dealing with from like my really old school Harvest Moon days, is the like crafting, which I know was definitely a big part of Stardew Valley. But even in Stardew Valley, I didn't really do a ton of crafting. I probably like crafted a handful of things and then sprinklers, and then just kind of like went and like did the rest of the stuff. So for this, like the fact that a lot of the things you craft, because you mentioned, Cam, that like a lot of the economy of the game is effectively built around the trash that you're picking up. And I didn't realize that like, oh, the things I can craft are using that trash, using the garbage, and like making a tool chest or a storage chest or something like that, or using that to make a compost thing that will, or the compost that will like turn my compost into fertilizer or turn garbage into scrap or stuff like that. Finding those kind of like, oh, I can build these things and then just kind of stick them at the top of the farm and have them kind of running. I appreciate that. I just in one of the last like days I played, hopped into the dungeon for the first time, or the mines for the first time, kind of made my way down the dungeon a little bit. So yeah, I'm kind of just exploring all the things. I'm doing the thing that I always do in these games, though, of like, I'm not talking to anybody. I'm just working all day, trying to get as much money as I can. And like, I've met, I think, pretty much everybody in the town at this point. I don't think I have any more question marks. I might still have like a couple strangers, but I've pretty much met everybody. But and I did find the blacksmith. We talked about that, Cameron, because you'll find like chests, or
Yep.
in the dungeon you'll find like geodes or whatever, and you need to take them to a blacksmith to like bust them open, pry them open for you. And the blacksmith is in the game. Last time we talked about it, we floated the idea that maybe it wasn't a feature in there, but no, they're in there. They're above like the community center or whatever, the museum, I think. I started doing some bug catching, a little bit of fishing. There's definitely a lot to do in this game, even in its like early game preview state of being. And so yeah, it's been fun. I've probably got like 30 things in the museum at this point, and I've unlocked enough of the like diving things to where they're basically like, all right, if you do 5 of these things, you can keep the suit. So I've kept the suit, and then I've like unlocked one more, and I've started just kind of continuing to, like, if it's a rainy day, I typically go diving because I don't have to water my plants. But yeah, it's definitely a fun little farm sim that reminds me how quick and easy it is to get like addicted and sucked into those games. It was very much like I'll just play one more day, and then I finish that day, I'm like, all right, just one more day. To what you were saying earlier, Frank, of like, all right, it's 1 a.m. Okay, it's 2 a.m. Okay, it's 3 a.m. Okay, it's 4 a.m. I should go sleep. But yeah, been checking that out. I long for the day of controller support. because that's the biggest thing for me that I'm struggling with right now is like every time I try and go into the museum, you have to like click a button to like enter the building, and I can't get the thing to show for the trick. Like it's a lot of like, all right, let me move over like a little bit, and now can I click in? Okay, now I'm in. Okay, but yeah, unlocking fast travel was a game changer. So shout out to games that do that in big farming world maps. Been a fun little time there in Coral Island. Shout out to you, Cam, for introducing it to me, and shout out to Game Pass for putting it on Game Pass. Because yay for that. So yeah, just wanted to give.
I don't know if it's
yeah. Go ahead, Frank.
Sorry, I was just curious because like I don't know if it's a little bit apples and oranges, but do you like this more than that Disney Dreamlight Valley game? That was kind of like similar.
I'm still daily playing Dreamlight Valley, in large part because like the few trophies that I still need are basically like they're going to take a long time to get, because like one of them is like clear 3,000 night thorns, and the game only spawns 10 a day for you to clear.
Oh, wow.
So it's like, all right, I'm like halfway there now. So it's like another 150 days unless they tweak that economy or whatever. But I'm still like hopping in and checking, like, you know, doing a little bit of that each day. That is much more of a Animal Crossing type game than this one, which is much more farm simming. There are like Animal Crossing type elements like the museum or like if you want to go and buy like furniture for your house and stuff, but this is much more like farming sim. The Disney Dreamlight Valley does have like farming that you can do, but it's like at some point it's such like a negligible thing. Like I've got almost $5 million in the game. I could probably never farm again, and I will be perfectly set for money. So yeah, it's more of like the daily check-in Animal Crossing type versus this that is like you're playing through day and night cycles of a farming sim. But it is fascinating because one of the things that Cameron and I talked about is the art style of Coral Island is very Disney like animation driven. Like all of the character models, all the 2D animation like of the character, you know, the text box and stuff like that are like everyone looks like a Disney character with like the big eyes. They look out of like Lilo and Stitch or 2D versions of Tangled or Frozen or something like that. It is like the modern Disney animation aesthetic of the character. So it is very interesting. Also playing both games basically at the same time is a funny little twist. But like Disney Dreamlight Valley is just all Disney characters, whereas this is like Disney lookalike characters. But yeah. So yeah, I would say this is much more in the vein of like a Stardew or a Harvest Moon than Disney Dreamlight, which leans way more heavily into the Animal Crossing style of stuff. Yeah. That's Coral Island out there on Game Preview or on Steam Early Access if you're interested. But yeah, if you have Xbox Game Pass, PC, which I have through like the Game Pass Ultimate or whatever, you can go pick it up on there. Other than that, otherwise I think it's like $25. So shout out. Oh, and I did because I've been doing a lot of stuff in the museum. I unlocked a cutscene that was like, all right, we want to start a Kickstarter to try and like refurbish the museum or whatever. And it was a fun little thing, having realized that the game, it was a very successful Kickstarter campaign originally. So, so yeah, shout out to that game and kind of continuing on with that. And yeah, I think that is going to do it for this week's episode. Thank you guys for joining me to discuss all these things, especially because like apart from Coral Island, I was like, I didn't really do a ton of stuff this week, so I don't have a lot to bring to the table. So I appreciate that you both brought God of War to the table so we can talk about that some more, as well as Frank. It's always a pleasure getting to catch up with you, as we said on the That Day Plus show. Hopefully now that you're settled in your new place, we can make this more of a regular recurrence again, and make that work in the future as well. So that is going to do it for this episode. Thank you guys for joining me. Let's go around our metaphorical table with any plugs that we have. You can follow Cameron at RevCabot, 2 B's and 2 T's. Anything you want to give a shout out to there, Cam?
Yeah, I want to give a massive shout out to this week's episode of That D Plus show that we recorded just before this podcast. We are talking Guardians of the Galaxy Christmas special. It's a fun time with the whole with the classic D plus foursome. With Logan in there as well. So it's a great time. Come check it out. It's you're gonna have a blast.
Yeah. Indeed. You follow Frank at Irrelevant Jokes, which I had correct on the screen this entire time, unlike that D Plus show, which will have it slightly misspelled. Anything you want to give a shout out to there, Frank?
No, I'll just echo that shout out for this week's episode of that D Plus show. My technically, depending on when you listen to it, my first kind of podcast back, and like Cameron said, we kind of got the Summer of Star Wars crew back together, all four of us. So that was a fun, and it was just a good time to chat and kind of talk about the holiday special.
Cool. You can follow me at Trevor J. Starkey. Since you guys have already shouted this week's That D Plus show out, I will shout out both the Coral Island Let's Play that I did last week. If either Cam or I have partially sold you on that game, but you want to see some hands-on stuff, go check that out. I played through the first couple days of it. And I will also shout out this week's Let's Plays on youtube.com/thatnerdysite, which are the first Skyrim Let's Plays that I recorded here from the new space to continue through that. And I also may throw out there, I didn't record it as a proper Let's Play, but I did save the PS5 gameplay of it. I played my first match in the new season or new chapter of Fortnite this morning, and I won. So I was like, well, that could make for a fun Let's Play of me, because I'll occasionally do those, and I'll go and give my commentary over it. So maybe stay tuned for that as well. You can follow all of us over at That Nerdy Site, or go to thatnerdysite.com for all the latest from us. If you liked what you heard, please rate, review, subscribe, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. Once again, thank you for listening. As always, stay nerdy and be good to each other.